lively as ever, you know, except for those few Siths I mentioned. You always get those. This is just water, by the way. Question time, I guess.
Question time, and this is kind of a first. Ian wants to make sure we get through as many questions as possible because he cares mostly about you guys.
I do.
So we're going to get through as many of these, but of course you guys provided a Bible here, or a Sith holocron of questions. This one, no. Oh, Catherine. This one's from Catherine. Catherine, where are you? Way back there.
She's there, I can see her, yeah.
Catherine would like to know, was Palpatine ever a young optimist like Luke, or was he always the person we see in the movies?
That's a very good question. He was, well, I suppose, you know, everybody, regardless of how they end up, starts by feeling fairly optimistic about things. But his optimism, I think, was always geared in a particular direction. I mean, he felt super confident that one day he was going to be the emperor of the universe. And also super confident that nothing was going to stand in his way. So from that point of view, I think he was a completely unusual being. A bit like, well, sort of a version of the devil. He came out of the womb with one idea in mind, and he achieved it. And that kind of single-mindedness actually got him to where he eventually ended up. It also led to, and we think it's true, his death.
The first time, right?
That's all right.
The first time death?
Oh, first time. Yeah, well, I don't know. You know, cats have 9 lives. Palpatine is 2 more. No, it's all legitimate. You know, a lot of people complained that he came back. You know, in the final movie. Oh, final? Is it final? Anyway, the last movie I was involved in, because they thought he died so convincingly in Return of the Jedi. But you know, come on, this is a genius. He always had a backup plan. First of all, he created Snoke, you know, after about 50 attempts. And he ended up with Andy Serkis, lucky him. But that didn't last too long. Meanwhile, he was being fitted out, you know. I mean, you've heard of plastic surgery. Everything about him was remolded, except, guess what? The voice. That's, yeah. And when he screamed it going down that chute, he made sure that at the bottom of the chute was a couple of lemon tablets, which is what he needed to get his voice back. So that's known as having a plan B. And he was very good at that. And also he had a team of expert surgeons. They were a little on the small side, but they did very well.
And now you know.
Yes, it's all true.
Let's stick with episode 9. Did you ever imagine you'd be returning decades later to explore his origin and eventual return?
Just say that again.
Did you ever imagine that you would be reprising your role decades later?
No, I had the fallacious belief that he died. I had that from, you know, practically day one on the movie, because I got the script of what happened in the final moments with Vader. So I thought I was really engaged for a very short job indeed. So I had no idea that George could have taken back in time and show how a very, you know, simple, straightforward, although a bit hypocritical politician can end up as the Emperor of the Universe. I think that is the saga. But I felt that he was dead when J.J. Abrams phoned me up and said, no, we're bringing him back. And I said, I think that's a movie I don't want to see. Imagining the state of his body and so on. He said, no, I think you'd like to see it. And anyway, we got this machine that takes him around, and it certainly was a machine, as you'll all know now. This wonderful sort of astral wheelchair that I got in, and I was strapped in, and there were 4 guys looking after me and whisking me around the studio, and frankly, I've never had more fun in my life. And I was perfectly relaxed, you know, the lines came out, and actually I think it helped the voice somehow, because I was very tightly held in by this apparatus. And the only person who worried about me was my granddaughter, to use the term, because Daisy, every time I swooped and came nearer, she went, "Oh my God, Ian, you're all right." I said, "I'm fine." So actually, Daisy, of course, was extremely nice towards me, while my granddaughter was a little less than nice. And so ever since I've done that movie, I've been wary of granddaughters. I mean, I've met some nice ones, you know, but you've got to be careful, because they may have an alternative idea. But as we learned from that movie, they're all good at heart, which was, of course, Palpatine's problem. You know, if someone's good at heart, that's not going to help him much. And I was finally completely destroyed. I think we have to agree that last time, when they obliterated me from the face of the universe, was pretty convincing. And I think if you had a plan B for that, you know, that would be maybe not believable, and we like to believe in our heroes and villains. So I think he's dead for good. That's a long answer to your question. What's the next one?
This next question is from Shirai. Shirai, where are you?
Where? Oh yes,
she's right there. She would like to know, how were you first cast for the Emperor of Palpatine?
It was a mistake. A lot of people agree with that. No, it's not true. Thank you. It was originally cast by a much older actor. I mean, that's sensible. I mean, the actor looked about what? Frankly, a little bit like I look now. Because he was, I think, in his early 80s, and I happen to know the actor. There's no point in mentioning his name. He's a wonderful actor. But unfortunately, he couldn't take the contact lenses tests. And in those days, those lenses were made of glass. And actually, the guy who put them in, who was brilliant and who made them, was called Richard Glass. I remember thinking that was a joke, but no, that's his actual name. And he looked after my eyes in the most recent Star Wars movie too. But the person who was cast previously couldn't be insured as a result of that. So that George and Richard Marquand were very quickly, because they had already started shooting, looking for an emperor. Now, I didn't know any of this. I mean, I heard of Star Wars, I'd seen the first movie. By that time, I hate to admit it, but I hadn't seen The Empire Strikes Back. So I didn't know anything about the saga of the Emperor. Anyway, I met George briefly one lunchtime. He was very polite, and you probably know this now, but I thought, well, it's nice to meet him, because he didn't say anything about the movie. And as I was leaving, I just heard from the door as I closed it, George saying to Richard Marquand, "Hey, great nose." And I thought, oh well, nice to meet him, and he likes my nose. But that of course helped, because as you know, the nose beeps through the hood, etc., and it lights well, and all of these things I think played into the casting. But I have to also admit that they were desperate. And also Mary Selway, the brilliant casting director of the movie, knew my work, and she knew that at least on stage, close to, I could play a very old person relatively convincingly. So that's how it all came about. But it was a big surprise to me in every sense. And I didn't even know what the character was called when my agent phoned and said, rather hysterically, "You've got the part." And I said, "What's the part?" And he went, he leafed through his notes, and he went, "Well, apparently he's called the Emperor of the Universe." So I said, "Well, I guess we'll be doing it then." And that's how it happened.
Y'all better clap for that. And as they say, the rest is history. This next question is from Zach. Zach, where are you, sir?
Yeah.
Over there in the back.
Okay.
Zach would like to know, do you think in Return of the Jedi, the Death Star 2 was intentionally made to look incomplete? Intentionally made to look incomplete?
I don't really know the answer to that, but I'll take a risk and say yes.
Next question is from Rachel. Rachel, where are you? Way
Hello,
back
Rachel.
there, standing up. Thank you for standing up. Here you go. As an actor who has done both, what are the main differences between performing in theater and performing in film? And what advice would you give to young actors transitioning from theater to film?
Okay. It's you learn it on the job, really. I think that's what most people would say. Yes, they are entirely well, not entirely, but mostly different. In the theatre, you're doing what I'm doing now. You're performing to real live human beings. It changes every night, and although the script is usually the same, it changes because of the reaction of the audience. I mean, particularly if you're trying to be funny and they laugh, that affects your timing and your listening and all sorts of things. And it's live, technically speaking, anything could happen. And that's what I like about it. In the movies, the script may change, but each scene is done, as you know, one after the other, and the camera is there looking at you, photographing you, hopefully, your thoughts in character and your feelings. So it's not really about projecting yourself or the character. It's about allowing the camera to come to you and capture those things. But you better make sure there's something going on for them to capture. Sometimes it's easy just to sort of blank out and say the lines. That doesn't work either, because the camera always finds out what's going in your head, and sometimes what's going in your heart as well. So these are the main differences. But as far as advice to other people, you pick these things up as you go along, in my experience. I'm now going to have a glass of water, because I've got something in my throat. No, it's not that.
This next one is from Esteban. Esteban, where are you, sir? Right over there in the middle. He also says, greetings from Mexico, gracias, Esteban. He would like to know, and I don't know how he knows all these details, but how much footage of Palpatine do you think was cut from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, in the original 4-hour cut?
Was it really 4 hours? Yeah, that's what they say. Well, excuse me, not so much of my stuff, I don't think, because of course I remember all the scripts. And I remember thinking in that big scene, which is the one I like most of you know, in the opera, that was the longest dialogue scene, I think, in the movies. And I thought, knowing how these things work, because usually you want to get on with the action, they are basically action movies, it's understandable. I didn't think that all of that would remain, but all of it did, and every single word. And I think it was to George's credit that happened. And it was also George's idea, late in the making of the movie, that it should be set in an opera house. Originally, it was set in another Palpatine office. He kept getting bigger and better offices. Apparently, that's what happens to people when they get more and more powerful and richer. And George said, well, I don't think we should do that for the big scene. I think we should go to the theatre. You're from the theatre, you like the theatre. I think that could be fun. So that's what we did. And the great advantage of that was that we could act, as we're sitting together now, this is where Alec and where Hayden would be, and I would be here. And there would be not very much else. There would be 2 cameras on the floor to make me look as hideous as possible, going along on tracks. And behind there was, blue screen, which eventually would be filled. And of course we weren't watching anything. I did say to George, I said, it's not Shakespeare, presumably we're watching, in the galaxy, are they still doing it? And he said, no, it's a squid ballet. Oh, okay. So, well, I can't wait to see that on the screen, but I was rather disappointed when it didn't turn up, but not totally surprised. Anyway, the great thing about that is you can, when you're acting, you obviously act with whoever's with you, and that was Hayden, which is he's wonderful to act with. And then you sort of, if you're having thoughts or whatever, you just sort of look away a bit. But I can also Palpatine could pretend that he was really interested in the performance. So it was a very good way of playing him and playing off of him. Once again, the theatre came to the rescue. So if you ever have a look at that scene again, you'll see that going on. And you can also, I can also show what he was thinking, what Palpatine was thinking, while ostensibly watching a piece of theatre. So that was a gift. And that's why I enjoyed it so much. We did it very late in the afternoon on one Friday, and Friday in Australia, which is where we filmed it, people are already thinking about Saturday in Australia and Sunday in Australia. And on this particular afternoon, the first AD, first assistant director, was having a birthday. And so there was champagne being prepared by a little gold person in the corner. And on the, used to be called, the video village, there were a lot of people, not quite as many as you, but quite a lot, behind black screens. And I'd just done a couple of scenes as the monster, so my throat was a little rough. And also, when in the scene, you know, unlimited power and the very sad demise of Mace Windu, yes, he's dead. All sorts of studio dust was being blown up by these giant wind machines which they drive towards you. Now that's part of the thing, you get on with it. But a lot of that studio dust had gone down my throat. So when we came to do it, I was a little hoarse. And I said to George, well, are we really going to do it today? We're going to wait till Monday. He said, no, I want to do it today. And he said, I'm sure you can do it. And we didn't even have a chance to run the lines, Hayden and I, so we had to go straight into it. But I didn't mind that. But I did say, I'm a little worried about the voice. It'll sound a little odd. And he said, no, it won't. It'll sound as if he's in transition. So, from, yes, you've guessed it, from the politician into the ultimate monster. So the voice was beginning to, you know, to get where it ended up. Well, it wasn't actually. I was just trying not to cough and, you know, just like now. But geez, that's a happy accident. I mean, when I heard it back, all I could hear was me, my voice, you know, sort of wavering and everything else. But George was happy that it sounded like in transition, and that's the way it is. So if you do look at that 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it is, you can now put all that in your mind and ruin the scene.
This is a great question here. If a movie was made about your personal life, who would you want to play you?
Well, if it wasn't going to be me, that's very hard. So many good actors around, it'd be invidious to single one out. I can tell you who it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be someone with the initials AI.
We have a question from Daniel. Daniel, where are you, sir? Over there on the right-hand side. Daniel would like to know which of your costumes is your favorite?
Yes, I had so many costumes. Trisha Bigger, who's Scottish, wonderful designer, designed them all. And of course, on the way to, you know, to get back to the black, as it were, I had all these marvelous creations because as his offices got bigger, so his costumes got more elaborate. And she'd researched these costumes all over the world, Japanese ones in particular. And you know, when I got the part originally, and I heard it was called the Emperor, I thought that's how he would look, you know, with these marvelous costumes, like a Chinese emperor. Not just a black dressing gown, you know, that you could hang up on the back of the bathroom door. But of course it turned out to be a genius costume, you know, because it offered so much and concealed so much. But in answer to your question, there was one, you'll now have a look for these, there's one costume which I was encased in, which I felt really reptilian in. I mean, it was like a sort of crocodile. The skin was like crocodile skin, and it was very tight, and it sort of constricted my throat in a good way. And I like that because it was the most helpful one to be even slimier than he obviously was.
This is a great question from Laura. Laura, where are you at?
Laura, okay.
Right there in the middle.
Oh yes, hi Laura.
She would like to know, being in all three of the Star Wars trilogies, which one was your favorite to work on and why?
Which of the trilogies? Well, yeah. A hard question, because the middle trilogy, really, I only figured in one episode. I know George put me back into The Empire Strikes Back, because that was Clive Rebel originally, who had no idea that, you know, what that character would go on to be. The prequels was exciting because I I talked about my first day meeting George. I had no idea that I'd have other days meeting George about a version of the same project. So I didn't know there were going to be prequels. Quite a lot of people didn't. George did. And he was going to wait until the technology caught up, as he said, before he embarked on them. So when I met him again for those prequels, I went into a hotel this time, not a studio lunchtime. And he said to me, "Do you know anyone who wants to play an emperor?" And I suppose that was his opening way of saying, "We're going to do, the prequels now. And if you're still interested, if I was still interested, you're going to be involved." And then he told me the story of this politician who was working his way up. He said, perfectly ordinary, not particularly charismatic, not particularly interesting, not funny, not successful, not particularly good looking. Oh, well, it couldn't be me then. And then he said there was this other character in the background, which to my mind sounded much more interesting. It was manipulating and all the rest of it. Well, of course, that turned out to be Darth Sidious. And I didn't know I was going to play Darth Sidious. I didn't know I was going to play anything, as usual. But I thought, oh no, he wants me to play this politician, and that's obviously the story of how Palpatine ascended. But then on the first day, when I saw my name opposite a character called Darth Sidious on the call sheet, they don't make mistakes. It suddenly clicked. I thought, oh, right, they're the same person. And that made me really excited, of course. And that meant that I could play the politician, like some politicians, not all are, as a devious, calculating and apparently charming person, while underneath the devil was lurking. And that's a wonderful gift as an actor. And the great thing, of course, was not to show it, not initially anyway. But he did say a very good thing to me, George. He said, now, because, makeup is going to be straightforward, I got a bit more hair, thank you, George. And the face was mine. But he said, you could think of your eyes, Ian's eyes, as not real somehow, as if they belonged to Sidious. And that was enormously helpful. I mean, I didn't do anything. I didn't sort of flicker or anything like that. But to feel that you were playing a character with your own face as a mask and something else was beside it, as an actor, that was such a gift. And so that was thrilling. Long answer to your question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. I love this one. This is from Sean Glicky. Sean, where are you, sir? Over here on the right. He wants to know, and I think we all would love to know, what was it like working with the late and great Christopher Lee?
Yes, well, it was great. I suppose, and he had many admirers, Christopher, rightly so, but he was one of my favorite actors up till then. I thought his Dracula was the most amazing creation. For some of the reasons I've been talking about. I mean, he was sinister and charming and all the rest of it, but he also, I talked to him a bit about it, it was also located, unlike the Emperor, in a kind of pain. He had to go and shut himself away every night and so on. So there was, behind his svelte cunning, and his ability to enjoy other people's blood, there was this sort of struggle inside him. And it was that I particularly admired about his performance. And then to get to meet him and talk to him about it, of course he was very unpretentious about it, said, no, boy, I simply learn the lines and turned up. Well, that's not remotely true. He also did have this wonderful, deep bass voice. And getting to know him a bit, he told me that his ambition had always been to be an opera singer. And he did have the ability to be one, because I used to hear him. We had dressing rooms next door to each other in the morning, sometimes singing bits from, Russian opera mainly. I remember one in particular called Boris Godunov, which requires a very low singing voice. And he had that, so I'd hear him warming up for playing in Star Wars every morning. And he was also indefatigable. He was one of those actors who never seemed to stop. He just went from one thing to another. seamlessly. So it was a very big shock when he no longer did that. But I pay tribute to him as one of the finest screen actors and as a great gentleman.
This one is from Hannah from Dallas, Texas. Hannah's right over there in the center.
Hi, Hannah.
And Hannah would like to know, what was your favorite Shakespearean play that you were in?
Well, I've been in one too. I suppose I was going to say that the obvious one is The Tempest, which I can give him a plug. If you're going to be in England early next year, go into the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford and see Kenneth Branagh play Prospero in The Tempest. That'll be worth a ticket. And I played in a theatre I used to run with my colleague Jonathan Kent, and that was great. It's about many things, but the central character Prospero has been shipwrecked on a desert island by people who wanted to get rid of him as a ruler, and he's there with his very young daughter. And then one day, all of the people well, most of them anyway, some of them are not too terrible, have been responsible for kicking him out, happened to be in the same ship on the same day, and he had developed, over the years on the island, magical powers. And so he was able to enact a perfect revenge on them. He got them to the island and humiliated and did various things. But in the end, he found, I wonder who's listening, that revenge is not a reward in itself, that it doesn't make you satisfied or happy or better, it just makes you unhappy and not so good. So that was the most interesting thing about that play. I also, more controversially, played Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, which always creates a fuss, because a lot of people think that Shakespeare's approach in that play is anti-Jewish. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's anti a specific culture at a specific time, and it's always valuable to see. It's always done in lots of different ways. But the one I really want to do, and I hope it might happen before too long, and that's King Lear. So, and he is, interestingly enough, most of the parts I play, the one you were talking about, Star Wars, older than me. He is actually 80, and if you've been researching, you'll know that that's younger than me. So, it would be wonderful to play a man who's overweening, too fond of power, but whose powers are also failing, physically and mentally. He goes mad, and he has a weak heart. You know, and I'm not subscribing to either of these, but as you get older, you get more and more aware of these possibilities. So if it happens, it would be a good time to act it.
You guys would love to see that, right? We have time for one final question, and I do apologize, no name on it, so can I give you a shout out? But why did the Emperor not warn Anakin about the high ground?
About because he was the kind of guy he is, you know. It's interesting, the relationship between the Emperor and Anakin. Because he was always, he did his bidding, but up to a point. He always really had to watch his back, the Emperor, so he was never entirely secure. And although he made him what he was, Anakin, he also didn't manage to destroy, as recent series have made clear, that little kernel of, presumably he started with when he was a kid. So he didn't manage to destroy his, absolute goodness. He didn't turn a good angel into a bad angel. And the interesting thing about playing Palpatine really is that he's not even a bad angel. As I once said, he's worse than Satan. You know, Satan was of heaven because he was a threat to God. Palpatine was not that. He was a solid block of evil. And it's always fascinated me that so much of you find him fascinating and are interested by him. Some people even like him. I'm really worried about these people. But everybody loves a villain, and none more than me. And you know, that morning when the phone rang and I went to meet George at lunchtime, little did I know that I would be in the privileged position of being able to say that, well, I am one of the biggest villains of all time. That's a bit conceited, so.
And on that note, San Antonio, make some noise for the one, the only, Ian McDonough!